So it is now my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker. Professor Stefan Brunthaler is a dear colleague here at Research Institute Code. He holds the chair of Secure Software Engineering since 2017, as well as the Munich Computer Systems Research Lab. Previously, he held positions at the Technical University in Vienna, the University of California in Irvine, and the University of Paderborn. We are now looking forward to his keynote on digital sovereignty and why we need a European hyperscaler. Stefan, please, the virtual stage is yours.
Thanks, Wolfgang, for the kind words. I'm presenting today on digital sovereignty and whether it also means hyperscaling sovereignty. And I couldn't possibly ask for a better framing than yesterday's main event. And you'll see some of the things that I'm going to talk about have already been echoed yesterday. Let me first start by introducing or by showcasing the geopolitics of digital sovereignty. So if we take a world map and map, for instance, search engines, we see that Google is dominating the United States, also Western Europe, Yandex is present in Russia, and Baidu is dominating China. A similar picture emerges when we talk about social networks, also when we go into online retailing, and finally, when we look into hyperscale clouds. Here the field is dominated by Amazon, Google, Microsoft in the Western Hemisphere, and Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu in China. And this picture is also reinforced if you look at the top 20 largest internet companies. So here we see that 12 of those companies are headquartered in the United States, and 7 are actually located in China. There's one company missing. Rakuten is a Japanese company that I did not include here. And what's striking about this picture is that if you take a look at the top 10, we already see an equilibrium between the United States and China. So the top 10 are already equally distributed in both markets. So this is one picture. The other picture are the 4 different perspectives on digital sovereignty. On an individual perspective, it has already been echoed yesterday that several facts we need to be taken into consideration. On the one hand, we have a lack of options for self-determination. So if you want to do web search or you use social networks, there's a limited set of options for you. Yesterday, it has been already echoed that potential targets in disinformation campaigns affect the individual level. We are already also keenly aware of a loss of sensitive private data. The companies are collecting a lot of information about us, and we're not in control over those information. And finally, a quite trivial fact, but I think it's also important, it's data generation and collection for machine learning purposes. So every time you talk to Alexa, Amazon is collecting this information. If we go to a more coarse-grained perspective to industry perspectives, we see that basically we have endangering European economic competitiveness through digital sovereignty or lack thereof. There are 2 things that are important in this aspect. Industrial espionage is one side, the other one is industrial sabotage. And in industrial espionage, I wanted to echo what Professor Breu said yesterday, is that this need not be an active espionage approach, but it can also be done passively through analysis of search engine results and user behavior. So if you have a company, Google knows quite well what IP addresses or what range of IP addresses belong to this company. And just by analyzing search engine results, Google can make a lot of interesting inferences about your company. And what this also means that this is going to be helpful in transferring enormous amounts of European research and development investments. So assume a company that has invested over the past 20 years steadily into European research and development investments, and all of this can be nullified through industrial espionage. Similarly, we have industrial sabotage, where you could, for instance, use industrial sabotage to indirectly influence market capitalization of a company that you then want to buy out. So this is also something that's interesting. On a government perspective, both of those 2 prior things, the individual perspective and the industry perspective, are going to be magnified. On the one hand, we see political instability through disinformation campaigns targeting a whole state, nation state. And on the other hand, we see that we have economic instability and to induce volatility and loss of competitiveness by reducing the tax base. And if we have less money that we take in as from taxes, we also have a direct limited scope of political actions. So this is from a government perspective. And finally, on a military perspective, digital sovereignty is quite important in order for us to be competitive on a military scale. And here, two things are quite interesting. The United States have already investigated quite effectively the idea and the concept of hyper warfare. And the idea there is to have split-second decision-making without humans in the loop. So you basically have automation and strong artificial intelligence that is then in control of massive amounts of unmanned aerial vehicles and unmanned vehicles in general. And similarly, we have a multi-domain attack that is interesting, where we have cyber domain in combination with kinetic forces in the physical domain, where in the cyber domain you can overwhelm decision-making, deter reconnaissance, and affect situational awareness, which then impacts the efficiency of your physical kinetic forces. And so here also, then digital sovereignty is a key process in order to ensure this. So what we see is, if we take in what I've used as introductory words, is that Europe must act. And I think this has been quite clear and quite clearly echoed also yesterday in the main event. But what I also want to state is that we must act in a principled way to close the gap. And I think principled here must necessarily mean we need to take a systematic look, make strategic decisions, and also do sound thinking. And for this, we need to take a closer look in today's computing landscape. Here we see the traditional software-hardware divide. On the left-hand side, we see that we have these applications that I've tallied on in the beginning on a geopolitical picture with web search, social networks, Dropbox, and so on and so forth. And what we see, if we dissect some of these applications, that they are basically also running or acquiring and requiring services, like they need to have some ground truth data, maps, navigation services, databases, storage, streaming, and compute power. And if you follow the orange path, the orange arrows on the right-hand side to hardware, then here we have a similar two-sided picture. On the one hand, we have a silicon level that affects how we build a single computer. But that is, again, understood in a higher level if you go to a data center level, where we need to control thousands and maybe 100,000 of computers in the data center. So this is kind of a new field that has been emerging over the past 20 years on how to run data centers. And if we take a look at this, what we see is that most of the value is actually created by hyperscalers that provide the services in combination with the knowledge on a data center and how to run these data centers. In other words, what we want in digital sovereignty clearly is the left-hand part. We want the applications, we want the services. But if we take this analysis, we must necessarily make this a conclusion that what we need first is to be able to run these data centers. If we're not able to go into this domain, we will not be very successful in the other domain. And this is quite clear from the slides that are following en suite. If we take a look at hyperscaling in the United States, specifically the data provided by Google, we see that the United States has two advantages in running data centers, hyperscaling data centers. The one is efficiency and the other one is specialization. When it comes to efficiency, what we see that Google has provided some data that 88 cents of $1 spent on a data center is actually going to compute power, to compute processing. So 88 cents actually go into computation, and only 12 cents are overhead. And if you compare this with the traditional data centers, then this is a lot worse. So only 20 cents on the dollar go into computational power, computational processing. The other 80 cents are overhead costs. And what this means in economic terms is that we need to spend a lot more money, $4.4, to get to the 88% computational processing power, or roughly 5 data centers to compete with just one of Google's. So clearly, if we're not able to run as efficiently as Google can, competition with Google is economically unviable. And the second part that has been quite striking and an astonishing development is hyperscaling specialization. And this is a picture that I took from a talk from Urs Hölzle, who is in charge of Google data centers. that he gave at University of California, Santa Barbara in 2017. And what's striking most is that this is showing these 4 racks of computers that produce 11.5 petaflops. This is a computational benchmark where a supercomputer takes 2.5 megawatts to produce this computational power. And Google was able to actually do this with less than 200 kilowatts. So this means there's a 12.5x difference, less power, less space, less air conditioning, while also specializing towards machine learning tasks. And this clearly is an advantage in knowledge that we need to close the gap to have the specialized computational powers in hyperscaling data centers. So what we need is quite simple, I guess. We need hyperscaling in Europe, and I'm calling for dedicated research efforts to create knowledge. I personally think it needs to be interdisciplinary, and we really need to rethink data centers from the ground up with European constraints in mind. Also, we need to invest heavily into the specialization towards European needs. And we need to build up these hyperscaling resources by complementing enabling policy, such as giving startups free credits to run on European hyperscaling clouds. And that has been echoed yesterday already too, we need to prevent the loss of knowledge and talent through undesirable foreign acquisitions. So if we build up this knowledge and Google pays these knowledge creators several billion of dollars, we need to actually ensure that this knowledge stays in Europe. And furthermore, we need tight integration with key European industries. So to ensure that they are safeguarded from industrial sabotage and espionage, or it's at least a lot harder. I think hyperscaling in Europe is an indispensable prerequisite for European digital sovereignty. It needs to receive focal attention, otherwise there are going to be economically unviable impacts. We cannot compete on Google's data center scales. It's going to inhibit European artificial intelligence and machine learning efforts, as well as economic competitiveness, innovation potential, and military capabilities. And that brings me to my final slide. I think we're facing a tremendous but formidable challenge. It won't be easy, and necessarily there will be setbacks. But on the other hand, I think that rising up to that challenge has transformative character that will also drive European innovation and well-being in the 21st century. So this is my perspective on why we need hyperscaling in Europe. I'm more than happy then to answer any questions. Please put your questions into the required or into the online system, and I'd be happy to answer these questions. And should you have questions later on, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. Thanks for your attention. Kannst du wieder auf lautlos? Okay. Oh, well, we received a question. The question is, do you see any specific open source software stacks like OpenStack to build up a hyperscaling and hyperconvergent infrastructure, as the French OVH is one of the biggest European cloud hosters? I think in the beginning, it needs to be based on these initiatives like OpenStack. There's also the Open Compute platform that we can build upon. What I think needs to happen is to rethink data centers for European scales. So on the one hand, some of the computational efforts that Google has been demonstrating, for instance, with their TPU, is obviously tailored to their own computational needs. Those needs may be different for European telecoms, for European industries, for European military purposes. And we don't, at present, we don't really understand the difference there. And what it also means is that some of the data center techniques that are used in the United States and in China are not really all that well applicable to the European market. And that has to do with our geopolitics. Europe is much more densely populated And also we are having some difficulties in broadband access. It's going to happen, but I'm positive that we can come up with different ways to build these machines. And later on, I think that while we're going to go with these open initiatives in the beginning, I think we may also come up with our own way of doing things several years down the road. I still think that all of these initiatives may also be heavily based on open source architectures and open source technologies when possible and needed. So for instance, in military realm, we may certainly also use lots of open source technologies, but there may be additional techniques that are providing competitive advantage where open sourcing them would be prohibitive to our financial investments. But that, of course, is only an argument happening when we succeed, of course. Thanks for the question. Okay, so thanks for your attention. That time has passed, so I'm going to hand back the attention of the microphone back to Wolfgang.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for this keynote. It was clear to the point and very convincing. I think I want a little hyperscaler for my home office for Christmas. Need to talk to my wife about this. And if this doesn't work out at home, I think there are some other people we should talk to about this.